Welcome to EOG Resources. All who work or visit an EOG facility are expected to conduct themselves professionally and perform all work with the safety and health of everyone in mind. We believe that safety is a matter of choice and not chance. Our goal is no harm to people, the environment, and property. This orientation is not intended to present all safety regulations. If you have questions after receiving these basic requirements, please ask your supervisor or one of our company representatives before proceeding with your work. This orientation contains information on a variety of topics. You will learn about emergency action plans, personal protective equipment, fire prevention, vehicle safety, job safety analysis expectations, pre-job meetings, hazard communication, prohibited items on EOG property, H2S awareness, work permits, confined spaces, lockout/tagout requirements, safe equipment operation, housekeeping practices, fall protection, excavation safety, and incident reporting requirements. If you are working in a facility that falls under process safety management regulations, you will receive additional information following this presentation. Listen well and be prepared to ask questions to ensure thorough understanding. Emergency action plans and evacuation routes are posted at the offices of each facility. Review and know the evacuation routes and muster points. Evacuations may be initiated by operations personnel, facility alarms, and your personal H2S monitor alarm. In the event of an evacuation, and if it is safe to do so, turn off all engines as you evacuate on foot. Internal combustion engines can serve as an ignition point if flammable chemicals are involved. Remember to evacuate crosswind or upwind until safe to move upwind. If the evacuation is due to a personal H2S monitor, do not stop until the alarm ceases. Stay out of low-lying areas. Once you are at a muster point, take a head count and wait for further instruction. Do not re-enter the area until an all clear has been given by a company representative. The following basic personal protection equipment, or PPE, must be worn at all times while working. Contract personnel are required to supply their own PPE. All personnel must wear a hard hat that meets the ANSI Z89.1 standard. Cowboy-style hard hats are not approved, even those with the Z89.1 stamp. Eye and face protection must meet ANSI Z87.1 standard. This includes prescription glasses. Additional protection may be required depending on the task. For example, a full face shield with safety glasses is required when cutting or grinding, or goggles may be required when handling chemicals. In every instance, eye and face protection must be determined and proper protection in place prior to working. Task-specific gloves must be worn while working. Impact-resistant gloves, leather gloves, and chemical gloves are examples of hand protection. ANSI Z41.1 approved safety-toed work boot or shoe must be worn except in offices. At a minimum, foot protection must have solid outer coverings resistant to water, oil, and chemicals. Flame-resistant clothing will be utilized where site-specific job exposure to flash burn injuries has been identified. All flame-resistant clothing must be compliant with NFPA 2112 or ATVP 6.0 or greater. FRC must be fully zipped or buttoned, sleeves rolled down, and be the outermost layer of clothing. You must wear hearing protection in all designated areas and when working in or around high noise areas. In simple terms, adhere to safety signs, and if you must raise your voice to be heard, hearing protection should be worn. When required, a personal H2S monitor may be a part of your PPE. Review the safety data sheets, your job safety analysis, and ask your supervisor to be certain proper PPE is in use. Wearing the required proper personal protective equipment is your responsibility. Fire extinguishers are located throughout our facilities ready for use in the event of an emergency. Contractors must supply fire extinguishers for their work activities. All fire extinguishers must receive a monthly inspection and have a current annual inspection. All personnel must be trained by their employer in the operation and application of the type of fire extinguisher. Flammable liquids must be maintained in approved containers and stored 100 feet from any ignition source. All cylinders must be secured in an upright position. They must be stored away from ignition sources and where they cannot be damaged by passing traffic or falling objects. Caps must be in place whenever stored or moved. Oxygen cylinders must be separated from acetylene or fuel cylinders by at least 20 feet. Solvents or any oil-based product are never to be used on oxygen cylinders, oxygen tank regulators, or cap threads. Operating vehicles or motorized equipment in process areas must be authorized by operations. Only park in designated parking areas. Only vehicles needed to complete the work are allowed within a process area. The use of personal vehicles must be authorized by a company representative. Vehicles can only be operated on established roads except when the location of equipment requires the vehicle to be taken off the road. Confirm that leaving the road is permitted before doing so. Follow the posted speed limits and drive to conditions. Slow down when driving near people and stationary objects, especially in the process areas. Use a spotter or flagman in congested areas or when you cannot see behind you. A job safety analysis, or JSA, is a hazard recognition tool used prior to completing a task in the absence of a standard operating procedure. JSAs must list the steps in sequence, list known or potential hazards for each step, and establish controls to eliminate or mitigate identified hazards. The JSA must be updated if a new hazard is identified. Any change must be communicated to everyone involved in the task.
Not at this time.
The JSA, along with all pertinent information about the work to be done, must be discussed at a pre-job meeting. All personnel are encouraged to ask questions, make suggestions for safer methods, and voice concerns during the pre-job meeting. Each person must be certain of how the work will proceed and the role each person plays in executing the task safely. Every person has stop work authority if they feel safety is compromised or the job is not proceeding according to the plan. If this occurs, supervision must be notified. The JSA will be posted at the work location and remain there throughout the work. All personnel must comply with the Hazard Communication Regulation, better known as HAZCOM. HAZCOM is the right to know law. All personnel must receive HAZCOM training from their employer. A list of all hazardous chemicals present at each facility is available for your review. All hazardous chemicals that are brought on location must be accompanied by the SDS for that chemical. The SDS must be supplied to our company representative upon request. All hazardous chemicals must be labeled and the label must be legible. Smoking is only permitted in designated areas. Possession, distribution, or being under the influence of drugs or alcohol while on the job or company property is prohibited. We reserve the right to search personal vehicles, persons, or property. Use of a cell phone, Bluetooth, or other mobile devices in a process area requires the approval of management. Hydrogen sulfide, commonly referred to as sour gas, may be present on our locations. H2S is a poisonous, colorless, flammable gas, naturally produced through the decomposition of organic matter. H2S is heavier than air and will gather in confined spaces and low-lying areas. In low quantities, H2S smells like rotten eggs. In higher quantities, H2S will deaden your senses. Do not rely on your sense of smell as a warning device. When working in areas where there is the possibility of H2S exposure, a personal H2S monitor must be worn throughout the workday. You must wear the personal H2S monitor within 10 inches of the breathing zone and not on the back of hard hats. Personal H2S monitors will light up an alarm if concentrations of 10 parts per million or ppm are detected. If this occurs, immediately evacuate per the Facility Emergency Action Plan. Remember, move crosswind until safe to move upwind. Stay out of low-lying areas. Personnel working in areas where the known concentration of H2S is 10 ppm or greater must receive further training in H2S safety, first aid CPR, and respiratory protection. Please contact your EOG representative for more information. EOG has facilities that are required to comply with Process Safety Management, or PSM, regulations. You must sign in and sign out of each facility you visit. This log can be found in the office or control room. PSM is a systematic approach in the prevention of catastrophic events while processing highly hazardous chemicals. Personnel entering our PSM facilities will receive an overview of the process and made aware of specific hazards for each PSM location. Please be certain that you understand the hazards associated with each process, that you understand the procedures required to work safely, and that you have been trained to perform your work. After the overview, a test will be taken to verify your understanding of the provided information. For those entering an EOG PSM facility, please remain after this presentation for a review of their processes and associated hazards. Permits are required for both confined space entry and hot work conducted at our facilities. Permits must be completed in their entirety, including names, dates, type of work to be performed, and equipment to be used. The person who receives the permit must communicate the information on the permit to every member of the work crew and be certain each person understands the provisions of the permit. In addition, they must post the permit at the job site along with the JSA. Permits are valid for 12 hours, end of shift or end of task, whichever occurs first. Permits may be revalidated in writing for one shift or a maximum of 12 hours if conditions have not changed. Whenever the work is completed or stopped, the permit must be returned to the issuer. A confined space is defined as any space large enough to enter and perform work, has limited means of access and egress, and is not designed for continuous occupancy. Excavations greater than 4 feet may be considered a confined space if deemed so by a competent person. Confined spaces have been identified and signs have been posted. Confined space training records must be provided upon request. Arrangements for air monitoring must be determined and indicated on the permit. Confined space attendants must have no other assigned duties. They must remain constantly vigilant and in contact with confined space entrants throughout the work. Hot work is defined as any activity that may produce a spark, open flame, welding, or burning within 100 feet of a pipeline or facility containing hydrocarbons. All provisions of the hot work permit must be maintained to include the use of a fire blanket or other methods to prevent a fire or explosion. A dedicated fire watch is required with the appropriate fire extinguisher. This fire watch must not be assigned any other task and will remain at the hot work location for 30 minutes after the work is completed. All personnel must comply with the Control of Hazardous Energy Regulation, better known as Lockout-Tagout or LOTO. The isolation and LOTO of hazardous energy must be authorized by your EOG representative. At EOG facilities, operations is responsible for the initial and subsequent isolation and LOTO of hazardous energy. Contract personnel who are performing work on an isolated energy source should verify the isolation is correct and properly LOTO'd before installing their personal lock and tag. Each contract worker must have their own lock and use a one-lock, one-key system. These locks and keys should be provided by their employer. Once zero energy has been verified and operations has completed LOTO, contractor locks and tags can be attached. At the conclusion of your work, locks and tags can be removed. You are authorized to place and remove only your lock and tag. Under no circumstance may you place or remove another worker's LOTO. In the event of a shift change or a change in personnel, the arriving employee must verify proper isolation and attach their lock and tag before the departing employee removes their lock and tag. This is to maintain the integrity of the lockout. The group LOTO provision may be implemented. Contact an EOG operations representative for further instruction. Information about LOTO must be part of the pre-job safety meeting. Be certain that you get all your questions answered concerning this important topic. Only properly trained personnel may operate a crane or motorized equipment. Evidence of training must be current and furnished upon request. This includes seemingly simple tasks such as moving equipment out of the way. For example, if a forklift needs to be moved, a certified forklift operator must be located and trained for the specific model in order to move the forklift. You must be trained and certified to operate an aerial lift. Have your certificate ready to show upon request. Contractors, even those with current certification, are not permitted to operate EOG's equipment without obtaining authorization. Good housekeeping is essential for a safe worksite. Keep work areas free of trash and scrap materials. Upon completion of the workday or shift, all debris and materials must be cleared, disposed of properly, or stacked in a safe fashion. Use barricades and safety signs to warn others of hazards in your work area. Hand tools must be in good shape. Inspect cords, hoses, and leads before work begins. Use the appropriate tool and only as intended by the manufacturer. Guarding for tools and equipment must be in place and in compliance with OSHA and the manufacturer's specifications. All fall hazards will be evaluated, and the appropriate protection must be implemented. All personnel must receive fall protection training from their employer. Examine the work area for potential fall hazards as part of your JSA. Contact your supervisor if you cannot be protected from a fall. Personnel must maintain 3 points of contact while climbing stairs, ladders, and equipment. Scaffolds can only be erected, altered, or dismantled by trained personnel under the direction of a competent person. A competent person must inspect the scaffold and sign the inspection tag at the beginning of each shift and/or if any changes have occurred. Read the tag prior to use. All ladders must be inspected prior to use. Inspect the working surface before erecting a ladder to be certain it is level and stable. EOG must authorize all on-site excavations. Excavators must utilize a one-call or appropriate notification system to contact utility companies. Excavations exceeding 4 feet in depth cannot be entered unless properly shored or sloped and inspected by a competent person. Regardless of severity, all incidents which include near misses, injuries, property damage, or fires must be reported to your EOG representative immediately. Environmental stewardship is essential to our company. All spills must be reported regardless of size. Our reporting process helps in developing lessons learned to improve our incident prevention programs. This brief overview of safety requirements serves only as an introduction. There are more components to working safely here, and your continued commitment is required. Throughout your work here, be certain that all your questions are answered. Everyone who works here is depending on you to do your part to create a safe work environment. It is through the combined efforts of all personnel that we'll achieve our goal: no harm to people, the environment, or property. We want you to return home each day to enjoy all the good things life has to offer.